Hello everyone, and welcome back to another short lecture in our series on how to write an EcoS term paper or master's thesis. Today we are going to talk about the final third analytical part. As usual, I will start with a reminder on where we are in the overall structure of term paper master's thesis, move then on to the main functions of the analytical part. What is it that you are supposed to accomplish there? A few hints on how to do that actually, and then I will conclude by showing you how many points you will receive for this part out of those 72 points that you will receive overall for your whole thesis or term paper. Okay, that's the basic structure again. You see we've arrived now at the third analytical part. That's what you see here highlighted in red. The main functions of the analytical part, sometimes I'm trying to use with some funny examples. I hope it works in this case for you. I like actually the comparison with a farmer. So you in springtime or late winter, you think about what to produce, why this product like potatoes rather than wheat or rice, where to produce it, like what area of land you want to choose, how to do so, how many people you want to employ, what kind of machinery you need, which tools and inputs, fertilizer, and so on and so on. From a academic point of view, that would be your theoretical part, right? Where you think about your topic and research question, the relevance of all that, like what is it good for? A farmer would think, okay, where do I get perhaps most of a yield, or where is the market condition best for this kind of product, or is that what my family wants to eat? That would be relevance in this case. And then you go on to actually wondering how to do all this, how others are farming, and comparing results, and perhaps reading some books on all this. So that would be our literature review. And then finally coming up with a work plan, like, okay, this is what I'm going to do in this order, and this is how I'm going to apply all my tools and inputs. That would be our analytical framework. Okay, so that was the theoretical part. Then as a farmer, it's now summertime or spring, and you go actually to the field and you prepare the fields, you are sowing, you weed, you irrigate, fertilize, you make sure that all the pests, do not affect your harvest. So that's the actual hands-on work according to the plan that you've drawn up before. So for us scholars, that would be the empirical part. And now that's what I was trying to get at, to explain what the main function of the analytical part is. Now it's harvest season, harvest season. That's like what you've been working to all the time, like all those preparations and all this backbreaking work and all the worries and all the frustration that you had when there was like a hailstorm or something, or cold weather, or when you were wondering, did I really actually plant the right plants? Shouldn't I have rather gone for corn instead of planting maize or something? Same for you. Have I chosen the right topic? Is that really a relevant research question? And then finding all this data, that was so hard, and you spent like hours and hours, and your eyes, they got square from staring at the screen for so long. But you got all this, okay? And now it's harvest season. Why do I emphasize it this way? Because strangely enough, students very often forget that. I see that there is a lot of energy and enthusiasm going into the first part, which makes a lot of sense. It's where you start, and it's also really a big challenge, right? Doing all these required literature review, analytical framework, making a decision and so on. And then you are justifiably actually very, very satisfied with yourself when you concluded that. Then the empirical part, you find all the information, you're really happy with yourself, and then time runs out, or energy runs out, or you're already looking at the next goal, and then you kind of do not use enough time and energy for the actual most important thing. That's the outcome, the result. Or for a farmer, and there it's actually more obvious that it's so important, it's harvest, right? You produce all this rice or corn or apples, and then you just pick 2 of them and leave the rest on the tree. That is silly, right? And same applies for our work as well. So please don't be silly. Regard this as another really important part here, harvest season. That's where you produce your result. This is where you produce the answer to your research question. And let's remember, this is how you started, right? You started by telling us this question needs to be answered, and you explained why, all this relevance, right? And now you have the answer. That is what you produce in the analytical part. The other thing is you use the analytical part also to market your product. That is, to explain to your readers the relevance of this answer that you found. Like, how does it matter? Who can benefit how from knowing the answer? And in the first part, this was more or less hypothetical. Now you do have the answer. So you can now actually specify this and say, okay, who can benefit how from knowing this particular answer that I just found, okay? And that's why I would say it's both production and marketing of your product in this wider sense, using this farming example, what's happening in your analytical part. And in terms of, commonly made mistakes, very often I notice that the analytical part does not get as much attention and care as it actually should. So please try to avoid that mistake. So how do you proceed for writing your analytical part? Well, you would typically start by repeating your topic and research question. Remind the reader, okay, this is what I wanted to do in the first place. Then you briefly explain how you have chosen to find an answer. Then you present your results. You do this strictly according to the analytical framework. And that shouldn't be really complicated because already in the empirical part, as we discussed in the short lecture on the empirical part, you proceeded according to the same structure. You produced your intermediary results. So what you do is you take your intermediary results and put them now together. You can do this in the form of a text. You can also use various forms of displaying your results more nicely. You can use graphics, tables, whatever you think will help you best to show your readers what you have done and what the outcome of all this is. And then the discussion of your results, like what is it that you have found? What is it that you could not find? Remember, we talked about this last time. That's a result as well, right? If you were looking for some specific kind of information and you couldn't find it, so either it's not there or there are really no sources that would actually help you answering this question, which means then that perhaps research question for future work would have to be reformulated or whatever. Really depends on the topic again. Also discuss the reliability of your results. If you would have a statistic analysis, that's actually a very formalized process, but also in all other kinds of research, you can actually do this. You can actually test discuss the reliability of what you have found. The reliability could be impacted by the quality of your analytical framework. It could be impacted by the quality and quantity of the data that you have found. It could be impacted by unforeseeable events that might actually impact your results in the future. So that's kind of stuff that you can include here. And you also notice that I already said future. As you see in the next point there on the slide, this is finally the point when you can do all those things that I told you should not do at the beginning. This is when you can start speculating. This is when you can perhaps discuss possible causalities, like this might have happened because actually this is what now people would expect to see, right? This is part of the harvesting, that you really do this thoroughly and from various perspectives, okay? Rather than just presenting the results, okay, this is it, goodbye, nice to see you. That is not totally wrong, but it's really like you're missing half of the analytical part, and actually you're also missing half of the fun. My point was that, especially for one of our term papers or master's thesis, putting this speculation, causalities, look into the future at the heart of your thesis is problematic. But I also told you, if I remember, that these are, of course, the most exciting questions. So now, towards the end of the thesis, when you've got all your results, it's actually the perfect time to discuss all those. And just from a very pragmatic point of view, remember that most readers will, if they read your thesis at all, they would most likely read the introduction and the final part first. And only those who are really interested, they will also read everything that's in between. So your analytical part, where you present your results, is actually very likely to be read by people, even though it's more at the end of your term paper or a thesis. So it is really important that you invest a lot of time and care into this. So you revisit what you have written on the relevance of your topic and research question. And that's why I also stressed at the beginning that this will pay off. If you do it well, it will pay off towards the end of your thesis, because now you can actually take this and say, okay, and now I found this result, and you kind of specify this topic of relevance, okay? You can now discuss whether the results you found are surprising, perhaps even exactly the opposite of what was to be expected based on the literature review, or whether they confirmed all this, right? Yes, the relevance of the research question I got here already, and the speculation point and future developments I also mentioned. So let me just once more emphasize that you please consider this is what you've been working towards all the time. In case of a master's thesis, we are talking about months here, if not even longer, right? So please don't keep this too short. Save yourself some time to really do this part well, because it's harvest season, and it's no coincidence that you have Thanksgiving or other festivals around the world, because that's actually something to celebrate, okay? So celebrate it by doing it well, so that like even a few years after having completed all this, you will still be kind of satisfied and proud in looking back, and unlike in some cases where you never want to see this thing again, because in hindsight you think, oh, this could have been done so much better, right? So this final analytical part is also quite important in this regard. Right, and now to just also show you how all this is going to be graded, I will look at whether in your explanation, presentation of your results and so on, you proceeded according to the analytical framework, whether you did that consistently, like follow every point in the same order and in the same logical connection, and so on. Have you actually answered the research question? I would really like to see that you do this explicitly. As I just said, revisit the research question and then present your answer. I don't really want to have to search, between the lines for kind of a half-baked answer. Please make this pretty obvious to me, okay? Yes, have you discussed the results and their relevance appropriately, as I just told you on the previous slide? Altogether, you will have 11 points out of 72. So yeah, this is it. And in the future presentations, I will also talk about some other criteria that will be applied for grading your term paper or master's thesis. I will also talk about some formal aspects and some other issues like what is a hypothesis, etc. So please stay tuned. But for today, this is it. Thank you very much, as usual, for your attention, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all again next time. Goodbye.